Hi GOH, this is Unit 5, Lesson 8, and today we're going to do the midpoint formula, which is actually a little bit easier than the distance formula. I think you'll like it. So we already talked about midpoints and what they were, so let's just review some of the basics. In this diagram in exercise 1, CD bisects AB at point M. So the question is, based on this information, M is the midpoint of which of the following two segments? If I'm bisecting AB, that means I'm cutting AB in half. So M is the midpoint of AB. Okay, M is the midpoint of AB. Why? Because AB is being bisected by CD. So what would be the congruent statement that you could write is that AM, if M is the midpoint, then the segment on the left, AM, is congruent to the segment on the right, MB. All right, so midpoints have a special place in coordinate geometry as well. And we're going to discover the midpoint formula. So I have M and P and N. All right, so P is the midpoint. In the diagram, MN contains point P. I'm going to use the distance formula to prove that P is the midpoint of MN. If P is in fact the midpoint, then that means MP is congruent to PN. So I'm going to use my distance formula to find the length of MP, and then I'm going to use my distance formula to find the length of PN. If they're equal, then that means that P is in fact the midpoint. So let's find the midpoint, the distance of MP. So I'm going to do x, 10 minus 2 squared, and then I'm going to subtract the y's, 9 minus 3 squared. 10 minus 2 is 8. 9 minus 3 is 6. Now remember, I'm squaring them. So 64 plus 36. And 64 plus 36 is 100. And remember, this is all under the square root. And the square root of 100, whoops, I didn't mean to write square root. Square root of 100 is just 10. And now I'm going to find the length of PN. All right, so same thing. I'm going to subtract the x's, 18 minus 10. Then I'm going to subtract the y's, 15 minus 9. 18 minus 10 is 8. 15 minus 9 is 6. 8 squared is 64. 6 squared is 36. Look, I'm getting the same numbers that I had before. And again, that equals 10. Okay, so since P divides MN, whoops, I left out the P. Since P divides MN into two segments of the same length, it must be the midpoint. All right. Given M is 2, 3, and N is 18, 15, the same points that I just used from the exercise 2. Let's find the average of their x coordinates and the average of their y coordinates. All right, so that's easy enough. The average of my x coordinates. So let's take those x coordinates, which are right here, 2 plus 18, and I'm going to add them together and divide by 2. So 2 plus 18 is 20, and 20 divided by 2 is 10. And then let's find the average of their y coordinates. All right, so the average of their y coordinates and the average of their x coordinates. So the average of their y coordinates, I'm going to add 3 plus 15 and divide it by 2. So 3 plus 15 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. So the average of their x coordinates is 10, the average of their y coordinates is 9. Well, let's look at point P, which was up here. Point P actually had the coordinates of 10, 9. All right, that's how we find the midpoint. So the midpoint is, I add the x's, I divide by 2, and I add the y's, and I divide by 2. The midpoint is the point in the middle. It's nice and easy. Think of it as an average. All right, let's write down that midpoint formula right here. So I'm going to add my x's and divide by 2, and I'm going to add my y's and divide by 2. My answer is a point, so it's in parentheses with a comma between them. Nice and easy. So let's look at it for exercise 4. If I want to find the midpoint, I'm going to add the x's, divide by 2, so negative 5 plus 9 divided by 2, and then I'm going to add the y's and divide by 2. 7 plus 15 divided by 2. Well, negative 5 plus 9 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. 7 plus 15 is 22, and 22 divided by 2 is 11, and there's my midpoint. All right, you guys try B. Add the x's. Negative 8 plus 5 divided by 2. Add the y's. 12 plus 4 divided by 2. Well, negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3 divided by 2. You can leave that as a fraction or you can leave it as a decimal, whatever you prefer. If you want to write negative 1.5, that's fine. And then 12 plus 4 is 16, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. So there we go. That's the midpoint. The only way that I can change this up a little bit is sometimes I give you the midpoint and I give you one of the endpoints and you have to find the other endpoint. So in this particular problem, find the coordinates of B. If the midpoint is negative 1, 3, so M is your midpoint, it's negative 1, 3. And M is the midpoint of AB, and A has the coordinates of 5, 6. So I know A is 5, 6. I know midpoint, that's the point in the middle, and I'm trying to find the coordinates of B. Here's how you can do it without writing an equation, because you can't use your midpoint formula. I already have the midpoint. The midpoint is the point in the middle. So I say to myself, okay, look at the x coordinates. How did you get from 5 to negative 1? Did you add or subtract? Well, I subtracted. How much did you subtract? I subtracted 6. How did I get from 6 to 3? Again, I subtracted. How much did I subtract? I subtracted 3. Whatever you do, you have to do the same thing, because however far away A is from M, B has to be the same distance away. So you are going to subtract 6. Negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. And you have to subtract 3. 3 plus negative 3 is 0. And that is my answer. So that's how you can do it without setting up an equation. The other way to do it is you could call B XY. So basically A is 5, 6. B, I don't know what B is. I'm going to call B XY. And I already know the midpoint. And my midpoint is negative 1, 3. So basically the midpoint of the x is negative 1. And how do I get it? I add the x's, 5 plus x, and I divide by 2. So I'm still using my midpoint formula, but I have an unknown. One of the things is still x, but I know the answer. The answer is negative 1. And then I just cross multiply this. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, and 1 times 5 plus x is 5 plus x, so x equals negative 7. So you're setting up two separate equations, one for the x's and one for the y's, and you're going to solve. I do the same thing for the y. The midpoint of the y coordinate is 3, and I add the y's, 6 plus y, and I divide by 2. I cross multiply, 3 times 2 is 6, equals 6 plus y, and then I subtract 6, y equals 0. So either way, you can see that you get that answer, which was up here, negative 7, 0. And we'll practice each